Are we diving right in?
We're diving right into Tubular Bells II, Mike Oldfield, released in 1992, interestingly enough. They couldn't really wait for the 20th anniversary.
True.
Yeah. But yeah, so like Tobias, you said it's like the most listened to album for you, or one of the most listened to albums. And I remember the time well when it came out. I had just finished school that year. So, I remember it well. But I'm really interested in like what you're going to say about this. Also, I sort of like need your input, I guess, and your triggers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious about your ideas about this one. Maybe because I said on the, we were both interviewed guests on a really, really cool podcast recently. Is the podcast just called Moonhair Studio, or is it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. So that was really nice. And I mentioned in my interview that I was always on the fence about this album. Maybe now, after preparing for this one and listening to it for the last 2 months, I think I'm no longer on the fence. I think it's just incredible. But I have gone through different stages with it. And I know that when it came out and I saw the cover, I actually think the cover is amazing. And I was really drawn in by it, and I bought it, I think, really on release day. I always loved parts of it, but I think I was so much into the first one that at first I think I was disappointed by it in some aspects. And then over time, but I kept coming back to it precisely because I wasn't so sure about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I was always drawn in by it because it was sort of a process of self-discovery for me myself. Why do I like certain things and why don't I like certain things about this album? And I know that it's actually the favorite of some people prefer it to the first one, which I think is really interesting. I never expected that, but there's a handful of people who prefer it.
Yeah, it's funny, like even when you use the word first, right, for the original Tubular Bells, it gives me a funny feeling, right? Obviously it is the first album called Tubular Bells, but this one is called Tubular Bells II. So it's not called Tubular Bells. So it's a different, it's a different album. And I think it sort of is a kind of a turning point, a big turning point in his musical output, just sort of like this is the album that sets the tone for the rest, almost all of the rest of his career.
Yep.
Which is why it is so interesting. And also like I listened to Tubular Bells 3 yesterday, and also like just comparing those two is really has really given me some new information about this and some new understanding. But it's sort of like a complex. And I remember at the time that Mike himself was kind of not proud, but like saying, okay, like in films you have sequels, and like this idea to make an album that is a sequel of something, and where he literally, not exactly, like not in terms of the length of the durations of the sections, but he sort of like rebuilt the structure of the album and reintroduced the musical ideas in a new way.
Yeah.
What is for me as like sort of like my musicologist side, I love the fact that some questions I've had about Tubular Bells were sort of like answered by how he treated the themes, or how we make variations of the themes for Tubular Bells II.
Yeah.
So I think it's really an exciting album to talk about.
And there is actually, I think it was the same for him actually when he was doing it. There's a documentary. We were just talking about it while getting coffee. There's a documentary about the making of Tubular Bells II. I don't know where this is actually from. It's really, really low quality.
I mean, I think it's from the time when he was in the studio with Tom Newman.
Yeah, it's from his time.
So it must-
is it part of any box set? Or
No. It was never released.
It was never released. Okay.
No.
That explains why.
It's just some fans have a VHS copy or something, and then it was put on the internet.
Because in that documentary, there's a short interview segment. I don't know who that woman is, but they're talking about the book. So maybe she's the ghostwriter who helped him write the book. But they're talking about the making of the book. So apparently, the process for Changeling started around the time of Tubular Bells II, and he's talking about the book and he says that this whole phase leading up to the album and remaking it was important because Tubular Bells I dealt with so many things from his childhood, and now through therapy he was coming to terms with them, but new things were coming up, and the making of the album was a process of also going back in time and going through those traumas again. And I think, and actually, you mentioned some things were answered, and he created a map. So he created a map for the album, which means he hadn't done that for the original, like the initial, the first draft, which is really interesting to me that there was no. I mean, obviously there was no score, but I mean, I would have expected there to be some sort of schedule or something, but apparently there wasn't. So he created that from scratch.
Yeah, back then that was all in his head.
Yeah,
for sure. And also, I mean, and at that point, he could have done that from his, in his head. I'm just saying, but yeah, like the idea to really make a sequel where you take the form and you put something new into the form, where also, like I said, the themes are just variations. That really is special, I think. I don't know, because I don't know those albums like Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell 1 and 2 or whatever. If those were actually sequels of a sort, or if those were just names or whatever. But yeah, this is a special. It's a special setup, let's say. So now, like, I'm really interested in what part is the most alienating one for you?
You mean the one where I have issues?
Yes.
I think that was actually, so there's one part which is most alienating, which is the caveman part, which is called Altered States, I think.
Yeah, Altered State. Altered States, yes.
The track title.
Which is amazing, because that's what makes it work for me.
That's
that's the title. Okay.
I still don't know why he would do that, but then I'm curious to hear your opinion about that. I think, generally speaking, my mindset at the time was this. The 90s were a time where it was sort of hip to be dark and to be. There's this in Glamorama. There's this quote which keeps coming back, which is hip is unhip is hip, or trendy is untrendy. What's trendy is untrendy, and vice versa. And I think that's actually quite an astute characterization of that decade. And I was really in a dark mindset, and I think this album is beyond some of the darkness which the 70s Tubular Bells had in many respects. And I think what I loved about the first one was the trance, sort of this trance thing where it keeps repeating and playing certain things by hand and playing himself and the listener into this trance, and it has this hazy, mysterious mood. And this one, I don't think has the same kind of mystery and darkness to it. And I just, as a person, I was somewhere else at the time, and I wanted some passages to go on for longer, and I wanted maybe some other things to be more minor key than major key. So there's a lot of that in it, going to a different tonality. I think that was more it.
I mean, in the broadest sense of the word, really, this was or is his sellout. Yeah. Where he started selling out, and because people talk about it, once he started making songs and blah blah blah, I think that was still authentic in the sense that he was doing research into what he could do or what he would enjoy doing, and even though it wasn't like his most favorite, but he did it and it was successful. And here now, like, because we need to emphasize again that this is the first album with a new record company.
Yeah.
So after he'd left Virgin, after he had fulfilled his contract, so he obviously wants to start the new relationship with a bang, and he says, okay, let's make another Tubular Bells, which was a huge success. So let's try to make some money.
Yep.
And so that also led to interesting things like bringing in production team. So Trevor Horn, most of the musicians credited on the cover are actually musicians that Trevor brought in, right? And it really is like literally like a conceptually a sellout.
Yes.
And it's cool, I think in a way it's kind of cool to do that, because there's nothing, as you say, there's nothing mysterious about that, and there's also not that it's not really that mysterious musically. And I agree that things have been transposed into simpler, in some ways less intricate, but there are some things that are more intricate on this album. But like harmonically, for sure, it's more digestible.
Yeah.
And as we know, like the harmony is really the one thing that repels, or too advanced harmony repels people.
Yeah.
And so that's why this is such an interesting album, because it's really designed. It's a designed product.
Yeah. Timeline-wise, I believe actually he was signed by Warner on the strength of the demos. So the demos had already been done. That's at least the timeline he gives himself. So he claims that people from different record companies were coming to him, hearing the demos, probably done prior with Tom. Like that's.
Well, as far as I know, he started recording in the summer of '91.
Yeah.
So is about a year before he delivered the album to the record.
Yeah, according to the book I have, which lists all the what's it called, the Mike Oldfield Discography reader? I can't remember. It was finished really, really quickly. I think a lot of it was really done separately with Trevor and him working on things at the same time. That's why it probably was finished so quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, you see it also, if that's true, which I don't know, but even then it's very, very much. I mean, Tubular Bells, the original, was also finished quickly, the first recording of the first side.
Yeah.
Right. But bringing a team in, bringing technology in ways like that, where he was using samplers even more. I mean, what is kind of interesting about this album, that with Amarok, he had already done, like that is the pinnacle, obviously, as we know, of his, also technically, of producing like a big scale work, right? And in a way, to me personally, this album, Tubular Bells II, is much less great, not just in terms of the composition, but also in terms of the sound. And I kind of like bring that belief that that's something that resulted in the co-production agreement or deal that was made to have Trevor Horn come in.
I'd say 100%, yeah.
And if you listen to the early stages, which is that early demo, I guess, or one of the first versions of what became the Sentinel track, the first track on Tubular Bells II, that is very much experimental, more experimental than the original.
Yeah.
And the Sentinel that ended up on the album, is the opposite of that. It just went into a more, for the time, contemporary production, like some elements that I really still don't like at all. Because they don't mix well as the sampled vocals, the breathy vocals in there. And
it's funny because that is what drew me in.
Yeah, I know, I believe you, and it's fine. It's fine. I'm just saying, like, for me, it's something that was really, I kind of out of place because he had already done that. That's how I see it. So in a way, at this point, like with this album, is the first time where I feel that he was behind the times, where he's always been at the forefront of using technology. With this, and it makes sense because in a way he was a pioneer and also a pioneer in using technology. And now with Trevor coming in, and obviously the technology that is popular with the audience, with the people buying records, is always a little bit behind. So in order to be mainstream, you kind of have to be a year behind in terms of style and taste and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And that's what started happening there, and then kept going. I think that's something that, for example, with Tubular Bells III, which then had the dance elements, which at that point were already old,
They were doing.
and especially for German ears,
Yeah.
right? So anyway,
No, but that I actually think that's super important. I think I disagree with the idea that it was behind the time. I think it is smack, like it's totally on point. But the way they,
I'm saying not the time that
For him personally,
for him personally
Yeah.
was.
I still think it's different. Maybe because I see it from this angle that, look, I compare it to Michael Cretu and his Enigma project, where we know there was a connection at some point. I was actually convinced after listening to Sentinel at one point that they're actually using the same samples. They're not. I checked it, and they're not. But there's lots of similarities. You mentioned that it's called Tubular Bells II, not Part 2. It's a different album. It's almost like a different project, and that's the way the Enigma did it. Apparently, the idea was Enigma 2 was not just a different album; it was a different record. But Enigma 2, like Enigma, was also Enigma 1, 2, 3. It had these elements which continued from one album to the next. So that's almost the same idea. Both of these albums, like Enigma 2 especially, have these world music elements, which are actually like Indian singing or Native American singing on Tubular Bells 2. And then you have mostly actually Arabic singing. I think it's on Enigma 2. You also had like Enigma 2, which was, I think, actually behind, like recorded just a little bit after, also has orchestral elements in an electronic context. There's like really a lot of stuff where I thought maybe behind the curtains they were working together, but I don't think so actually anymore. But Enigma 2 was super, super successful. So I would say they could have, if they wanted to, they could have made this one just a little bit more electronic, and then it would have been like smack on, like it would maybe have been even progressive for the time. But they didn't. They explicitly didn't. He didn't want that. So he recorded an album which is, I think, super technically complex in its creation, but you don't actually really hear it that way that much.
I mean, what is true also is that, well, no, I have another thought now. So even after, because Heaven's Open was the album before this, right? We talked about that last time.
Yeah.
And sonically, it had something really, really strong about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. I wish I knew, but there's something weaker in how the music has been captured here.
Yeah.
And that even, like, if you listen to the guitar outro of the first side here on Tubular Bells II, it just doesn't, it's not well recorded. So, and so I don't know why that is, how that happened. But anyway, I mean, it feels more like obvious. I mean, obviously more like a collage.
Yeah.
And also a collage of different sources, which again makes sense if there was like 2 stages of production, right? Anyway, I mean, all these things that I'm saying, they are not like, I'm not necessarily critical about them. It's just like descriptive at this point, right?
Do you prefer the live version? Like the Edinburgh Castle video?
Yeah. Do I prefer it? It's it's incredible how close It is to the album. So the way that they managed to really have the sequence parts, and like even when the parts were in sequence, the program changes, the MIDI program changes, everything like that came from. So it was really, again, like certainly not behind.
No, it was
No,
insane.
not at all. Yeah. So they pulled that off. I think I like it, but I wouldn't. It's funny because to me they're either the same, you could say, or is they have nothing to do with each other. Somehow there's no gray zone, so it's difficult for me to really say what is.
Yeah.
It's
So
obviously that the fact that it's played live, that there are some parts are slightly different. That there's like in the original recording there are even some little mistakes and stuff. I like that, of course, but somehow let me just use this word once. I hate it because when people say it to me, I hate it, but they get slightly colder. The both the album and the live performance, right? Like compared to what he did in the 80s, it's really, you can't really compare it at all. But then I remember, because I was at the Tubular Bells show in '93, in April '93, I think, in Germany. And like sonically and like the performance was just unbelievable. Like the two even like managed to do something like that was great. And in the concert hall, unfortunately I do not remember how it translated there, because I was
sure.
Yeah, I was like 20. Right? I do not remember that well. But on the recorded medium, I'm really not that fond of this album.
I totally concur, and I actually have something to say about this, which is really important, I think. So I agree totally. I think the word weak hits the spot. I think that's totally my impression, and was my impression as well. When I saw the Edinburgh Castle gig again, I thought, okay, this is really a lot. I like this a lot better. I think this has more ambience and more depth, and well, quite obviously it has.
Yes. Yes.
But I also like some of the effects on the guitar better.
Yeah.
There is actually more power in the guitars, for example, on the single version of the Bell. Like there's an insane difference in the guitar.
It's a different mix. Yeah.
It's a completely different mix.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, now I'm going to listen to the vinyl. I'm going to check out the vinyl version. So I bought the repress of the original mix. So you'll see a lot of complaints about this particular pressing, because it's cut with a very low noise floor. So it's you have to crank it up really, really high.
Oh, so it's okay.
It's very quiet. So if you get a bad copy, then you're going to hear all the crackles and all the pops. Mine is flawless, and it's dead, it's like flat as a pancake. But the most important thing is, this is clearly a different mix from the CD version. Not like completely like musically, but sonically. The bass is far more pronounced, and the instruments a little more in the back, which automatically gives it a more.
So it's a different master, you say?
I'm going to argue this is the actual master.
Okay.
It gives you a little bit less clarity and less transparency, because the other one, the CD, is actually ultra analytic and ultra. You can clear every single instrument is at the same level, and this one has less of that. But so you're hearing less, but you're hearing more of what's important, I would argue. And I think this one sounds closer to the gig. And this one brings all the elements better together. The Siegs work better. It's less of a collage and more of a one flowing piece. I mean,
yeah, I get it. I mean, the analog medium in this case brings things together, and which obviously with an all digital production, which I guess it was. I don't know. And it goes straight to CD, then there is no.
I think they made two, because it doesn't actually in the credits. There's no mastering credit, which is, I think, for the time still fairly common.
Yeah.
But there's a mastering credit. You can find one in the promo copy of the CD
really?
fit out, and it says mastered by Nimbus. So Nimbus is just the pressing plant.
Yes.
So they would get the master and then do the master, and he actually worked with Nimbus like from the time from Tubular Bells. And even Richard Branson was a minority stakeholder in Nimbus, funnily enough.
Was that the promo CD?
Yeah, this is sort of
Okay, you know, so this is difficult because you don't know what they mean with mastering. It could be the glass mastering.
Yes, could
for
be.
the CD,
Could be.
and which has nothing to do with the sound, or shouldn't have anything to do with the sound.
Just my idea is that they created a CD master and a vinyl master, and whoever did that didn't know how to do a good CD master. That's my impression. We're just out of the 80s. The CD is like the vinyl is still an important medium, I would argue. And I think just my impression is they did a great vinyl master, and what you're hearing on the vinyl is the way the album Mike signed off on. And then they made a CD master at the plant. That could be a theory. And then it got pressed. Because I don't, like if I'm hearing this and I'm listening to the Edinburgh gig where he was in full control, it's not the same.
No, it's not the same. But I'm wondering here also what, I don't think that Trevor Horn's team would have let this out without having some control over the mastering or having listened to it or whatever. Like, it's interesting, like if any of our listeners know who mastered Tubular Bells II, you know, like we would really love to hear from you. And
Amarok was definitely mastered by
by Dennis?
Yeah, by Dennis.
Dennis Blackham, yeah.
Yeah, and but this one not. This one was whoever did it was someone else, or maybe it wasn't.
It was uncredited.
Uncredited, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, speaking of credits, I mean, like I looked up on Wikipedia that there's actually a bass player credited. And that is interesting because on none of the hard copies there's a credit for a bass player.
No, there's funny. There's even a credit for noises and drum loops, but not for a lot of the musicians.
Yes. Well, I think that most of the musicians are actually listed there, but like with the bass, or again, so it's another question. Was there really a bass player called Steve Payne involved in the record? That would be very interesting to find out.
Yes, that's true. Actually, pretty much everyone else is credited.
Anyway, I mean, this album, like, and you mentioned that, takes in quite a lot of like the influences, also the, what I would say, for my personal taste, the unfortunate influences of the late 80s, 90s, where, for example, using the pan flute samples was really cool in 5 Months Out.
Yeah.
Right? Where it kind of like gelled very well with the experimental instrumentation. Here, and again, maybe it's also what you mean with the recording being too pristine, or like the separation being so great, which some people love.
Yeah.
Right. Right. But having like the Tubular Bells theme played with a panpipe, you know, like at the beginning of the second track on the album. It's really a little bit strange.
Yeah, maybe.
No. I mean, for me, it still is a little bit strange because also, and this is also something that I read back at the time, and also now that parts had been transferred from being hand played to being sequenced, and this like the factor that there are like these quantized parts, which means they're totally in time, is really something that most certainly sets this album apart from a lot of the music he'd done previously. Yeah, where like the human factor was really important. I mean, apart like even, and you know that I love to come back to the wind chimes of the Islands album as sort of like an example of using modern technology of the time, sequenced parts, but they sound like, or still sound organic somehow. Yeah. And that's something that is kind of different with Tubular Bells II. And again, I'm not saying this as that it's something bad. It's just factually different.
Yeah. But there's one thing I'm curious about, because we talked about this also earlier, is this, like the idea of where would this have gone without the commercial consideration? Yes. So there's a demo of the beginning, and we have the sequence. But there's a tiny difference, which makes a huge difference in the end, which is that there's a note more in the final product than it is on the early stages one, and now you can put it into a nice 4-to-the-floor grid.
Yeah. Like the early stages version or demo, which I don't think is a demo really. It was actually,
No, it sounds fantastic.
It's really also it does actually use the almost the exact sounds that they had for Tubular Bells I. I don't know, or the original. I don't know how they did that, or if it was even. It's even possible that it was sort of edited from the original recordings.
So what
I'm just saying it's possible. I don't know if it's true, but
what he said is he tried to get all the instruments, buy all the instruments back.
Yes,
So he's
yes.
definitely using period
Yes.
instruments.
Yes, and I still love that. Like when I listen to Tubular Bells II nowadays, and I'm hearing the old organs in there, even though they are combined with like the digital, some digital keyboards over the time. Although I think Kurzweil's sampler or whatever he used there, and it's still charming. It's just again that the mix, how it's mixed together, is really very different from the '70s approach. It's but anyway, going back to the early stages, what I love about it is that he's used some different sorts of effects and like the delay effects in there, which is something he had never really done before. Again, we don't hear that at all on the final record, but there are some interesting sort of like where delays stack on top of each other, stuff like that with the main theme, which I like a lot. And there's a very prominent kind of like rhythm guitar, also electric rhythm guitar in the early stages track, which again completely lost in the record. And for me, really the rhythm guitar playing that Mike discovered between like those years that he was touring, 79 to 84, or especially 79 to 82. Was sort of like something that I would have hoped that he would bring that back in some form and fashion, and he did in that demo, but then it was gone, and it's I find that slightly sad.
Can you, because you've heard more of the leaked
like the first mixes or whatever.
Yes.
They are called untravered. They call them untravered versions.
Can you talk about this for it? Because I'm really curious, and I haven't been able to find them. I just know from the documentary.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I haven't listened to them in a long time, but it's just early mixes of some or most of the tracks actually, and it's just slightly different mixes, and maybe here and there is a slightly different part, but in overall, with the exception of this early stages track, it is much closer to the Trevored version. I mean, there's like there's the addition of some drum loops and stuff that was missing in the and so literally, I really think, I mean, it's kind of a funny word, untravered, but I think that's what it is. So it would be interesting to get back and listen more deeply. I mean, the problem with those recordings always was these unreleased tracks that were collectors already had in the 90s. I remember getting copies like in the 90s, mid 90s, I think. The quality was really bad. And what happened, because at that time, it's the first kind of digital denoising technology was available, and a lot of bootlegs and recordings you could find, which maybe people originally had on cassette tapes, I don't know, were denoised in a very horrible way. So it was kind of unlistenable. And so somewhere there must be like the original bootleg or the original copy of, but what we were able to hear back then was just really off-putting with like watery, phasery sound, because people had tried to denoise something, not knowing what they were doing. And but anyway, like these detrevered versions, they show a little bit of a different side, what it could have sounded if it was more raw.
Yeah. That's in line with the excerpts you get in this documentary, where there are parts where I think, well, I would have loved for that to be part of it.
Yeah.
It's so intimate and vulnerable. There's this really vulnerable. I think that's the end of the first section of the A side of the vinyl, which is, I think, it's so beautiful. It's just him and the guitar, and there's a little bit of backing to it.
Yeah.
And it's so moving and.
Well, also that Blue Saloon part, which is which is like the bluesy kind of guitar thing, in the you call it documentary, but I think it's just somebody filming him in the studio as he's playing the original parts, and he's playing it in a much more bluesy way, also more in the fingerstyle way with the bass notes, with the thumb, so really different from what ended up on the album.
Yeah,
and yeah, and I agree. I mean, yeah, it would have been cool to kind of like hear. I mean, it's like, it's strange to say like a rougher version or a raw version or something, because it's just different. It's not that, but just more to where he came from at that time, writing these parts on guitar.
Yeah.
Because this is like everything sort of like, and in a way, that's also the terminology they used back then. It's sort of like deconstructed and reconstructed.
Yeah.
Things broken apart that were maybe not separate tracks before. That was more, gelling more even in the recording stage. And yeah.
Yeah. So maybe for those listening who don't know, but the way they actually approached it is they got all the vintage equipment. But the vintage equipment was obviously not perfect. So they sampled the equipment and then processed it to make it sound good again, or like perfect in parts. And then there were sections where Trevor would work on stuff that Mike had recorded, and Mike would re-record it, and sometimes Mike would raise entire sections and Trevor would come back and with all the stuff gone. So there was a lot of work on it done. And I think that's why it can sound like an electronic album, even though it's actually almost all acoustic. There's very, very little synthesizer on there, but it sounds electronic.
Because
it's
of
gone
the production.
through this production thing.
Yeah. And again, like at the time, like it was the way to go. I mean, it's cool, and again, like it adds an extra dimension to it, like it or don't, or not. But it's really special for that as well. And I know that you spoke with Trevor about the album already. We should definitely send him this podcast to find out what he if he wants to attack us after this.
Nothing but good things.
No, I know. And it would be just interesting, like I said, for all of his albums to talk to people who've actually been involved in the production process, to understand more about what was going on a technical side, but also on the decisions that were made,
I think just as part of this commercial approach, which I think is pretty clear, I think they were talking about the music a lot, even though the recording process wasn't super long. And it reminded me a bit of, I did an interview with I can't remember his name, but the guy of Lamb, the duo. So I did an interview with him. He was part of a U2 production. So he was part of the production. They called him as a producer. In the end, I think only one of his tracks got used, maybe not even for the final album. But he described the process as one where they would try a million things and go for really experimental stuff, and then the end product was really generic.
Yes.
Even though he was very thankful, that's not the word he would use. He was really complimentary about the band, but that's the way I perceive it. And I think so. They discussed having an orchestra in there. It was a thought. Are we going to do an orchestra in Tubular Bells II? And they actually had booked sessions with some philharmonic orchestra, I think in Los Angeles.
There are actually some, I mean, it's all samples, I know, but there are actually some brass, and orchestral sounds in there, which I still find alienating, I have to say.
And I'm pretty sure that the bell, the final of the A side, I'm pretty sure that there was one with a longer lead up. Because the transition is very abrupt. So I'm pretty sure that was cut down at some moment. So they just they just and the transition between Sentinel and the second track is also quite well, not jarring. I think actually it's effective, but it's like a new track. It's not.
Yeah, it's a sudden change, right? Yeah.
And I think they discussed, and there must have been really radical versions of some of these pieces, which we don't know.
Also, as you remember, Toya Wilcox told me that around that time, Mike had approached Robert Fripp,
Yeah.
her husband,
Yeah.
to play on a record. And we believe that it was Tubular Bells II.
Yeah.
So the concept of it must have changed a lot.
And
Or they've tried a few things. Or
think about all the narrators or the what's it called, the
MC?
MCs they did.
Yes.
Do you know the one with Otto Walkes, German?
Yeah, of course I have it. Yeah.
So there's
I have
one
it on
with
CD.
German comedian.
There's like this Carlos guy from Spain who did a version.
Yeah.
Yes, there are all sorts of. There's a Viv Stanchel version even.
Yes, I haven't actually
Which
heard
they made later. Yes. And Alan Rickman. I mean, that's a cool choice, I have to say, for a voice.
Yeah.
I think it's. And he's uncredited on the original album, right?
Yeah. Well, he's credited as a passing stroller.
Yes. Something.
Maybe for, I don't know if that's for copyright reasons, not copyright, but rights reasons.
Mm-hmm. I actually see on the vinyl here there's a typo.
Yeah.
It's not additional.
It's incredible. I mean,
additional programming. Yeah. Yeah, so like just going back, so the concept of it, the ideas for it, must have changed over time quite a bit, and it's, I mean, you used the word generic. Unfortunately, I think in some cases, like what happened here is that decisions were made for more. I mean, again, when I say generic, it's not a good word, because we always have to see it relatively, right? So it's relatively, the decisions were made to go lighter, smoother, easier. But again, like that's like if it's sort of like this, the relaunch of Mike's career with a new record label, the pressure of having success with an album, like making a completely new record at that time would have been much harder, let's say, or much less likely to be a success than doing this. And in a way also because like Virgin asked him to make a Tubular Bells II and then didn't give it to them, but to was it Warner, right, at the time.
I actually, not only that, I think the bigger sort of provocation is also the fact that he broke it down into different tracks, because that completely changes the listening experience, and it's much easier to sell it that way. He didn't do that on Armor Rock, so he gave them a 60-minute track, and here he gives them, all these.
What I find funny about this, and it's interesting that you mentioned that now, is if you really look at the titles. Let's read the titles.
Yeah, do read.
Like the titles. Sentinel, Dark Star, Clear Light, Blue Saloon, Sunjammer, Red Dawn, The Bell on the first side, and then Weightless, The Great Plain, Sunset Door, Tattoo, Altered State, Maya Gold, and Moonshine, really has nothing to do with the original vibe of Tubular Bells.
But do you know what it has to do with?
No.
The Songs of Distant Earth. Like probably half of them are titles to Arthur C. Clarke short stories.
Yes. So that's what I find super interesting, that here he opted to completely remove himself also from the titles that he like used originally. So what is called Peace, like in the original Tubular Bells, is the Great Plain here. And so or it's a Great Plain or Maya Gold. I think it's either one of those. So it's really interesting that somehow, and this may be like psychologically, is something to distance himself from it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but somehow it gives me that vibe that the titles are really a very big thing to make this more of a, like I said before, a design product rather than something that is something that entirely comes from the heart.
And I agree. I said also, even though there was an interview with a Spanish, I think, interviewer, which starts off really well, and then the interviewer asks, "So are your intentions actually pure now?" Like when Virgin asked you, it was clearly a commercial thing. Are your intentions pure now? And he gets really angry.
Oh, really?
That's incredible. How would dare you ask me that? So I don't know if it's because he gets caught or because he actually deeply believes in the music. I would have thought that he believes in the music because. Well,
I mean, for me, of course. I mean, like, for me, he's still the GOAT, right? The greatest of all time. And also with this album, he is the greatest of all time, right? And I'm not questioning any of the decisions made. I think those are as kind of like a product of the time, a product of the circumstances, and I think it's a very fascinating record. Like biographically, right? So I don't look at an artist's work purely as like, do I like it, do I not like it, or it's not just descriptive. It's not just descriptive, and it's not just about emotions or what I think about it. It's a statement of in that time, right? And so. It's a powerful record. If you think about it, it went number one in 2 countries, I think, UK and Spain.
Sold 4 million copies.
Yes, so huge numbers, right?
I wonder sometimes. So the titles to me would indicate that he'd been thinking about the Arthur C. Clarke project around this time already.
Yes.
If he had switched it around, if he had recorded the Songs of Distant Earth before this one, then he would have. Sort of like he'd come in the slipstream of the Enigma 1 album, but actually sort of before Enigma 2. And maybe then that album, which was a commercial disappointment, would have been much bigger, which I would have thought incredible because I love the Songs of Distant Earth. And maybe then this one would have gone even higher. Maybe because if you look at, I mean, you would have had Amarok and the Songs of Distant Earth, 2 like radical departures, then to go back to this one. And maybe it would have turned out differently. I don't know. I just think that maybe he could have done the other one first, and then it would have been really ahead of his time, or like considered in the 90s where everything progressed so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, and let me say it this way, what the elements that were sort of added later to Tubular Bells, that's what he had then worked with for the Songs of Distant Earth.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Right? So in a way, the drum loops, let's say the production ideas, and he stripped away a lot of the other things for that next album.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's why I said that Tubular Bells II is really like the turning point in his creative life. Actually, like, I don't want to talk about this now, but Songs of Distant Earth is really very, very different from anything he's ever done before. And Tubular Bells II is sort of the precursor to that. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you can always ask yourself, what if, right? But I think it's kind of impossible. And maybe these 2 albums, these projects were worked on at the same time. You never know. Or as you said, maybe Tubular Bells II was such a quick thing that immediately he kind of like stayed in that mode and maybe had just some of the drum loops lying around that, and then started doing the more stripped down way of composition, right? I don't know, but it's...
Definitely, he didn't need Trevor Horn for the technical part. He explicitly says that also, but it's pretty clear that...
I mean, Songs of Distant Earth also sounds better than Tubular Bells II, I think, sonically.
Yeah. And it sounds better, for example, than Moby's Play, which is also an album of that time, which sounds absolutely horrible. I mean, in the sense that you can hear all the loops are badly cut and edited, and I mean, that one is
Oh,
almost.
but that's part of it, right?
Yes, yes, it's part of that charm. Like
yes.
Tubular Bells I is
Yeah.
has its charms because of its imperfections, but like I don't think he did that on purpose. I think he just didn't edit it properly. Like
Yeah.
he was done with it. I think I just want to say,
But that's sort of like a vibe thing, though, and that is something that really in popular culture was only making a start, even though like hip hop was already around for more than a decade.
Yeah.
But really in the mainstream, to have something that's not perfect, like you say, I think it's also wrong to say that people don't know how to use the sampler, let's say, or I think it's just something that it has a vibe and it's fine.
Fine.
And that's how like a lot of hip hop and then also early 80s electronic music kind of started happening. Yes, maybe the people didn't know what they were doing, but they struck gold by hitting on something that had a vibe.
Yeah.
And that is clearly, to me, like in Tubular Bells II, that is where there's a struggle. You can hear like a struggle of the times, like the Tubular Bells early 70s and Tubular Bells II early 90s crashing or clashing
Yeah.
in terms of aesthetic.
Yes.
Of an aesthetics.
Yes, I mean, when you hear, I get sent a lot of, I got sent a lot of classical music remixed for a while.
Yeah.
That was a big thing, and that just doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because classical music, the meter is purposefully not strict.
Yes,
It changes all the time, and that's part of why that music works. So if you put Vivaldi to a techno beat, you destroy whatever there was. I mean, maybe it's going to sound funny or cool or inspiring, but it's not the same thing. And maybe that is part of it. That some things work, like there's this Tubular Beats project, and some of that stuff actually it works. I think also Tubular Bells 3, the final, when the bass comes in, I think that's powerful. When you suddenly quantize it, but the thing is, it suddenly it goes into that for a certain effect. And for this one, he actually since has he called Trevor Horn Mr. Click because he wanted everything to be perfectly synced. And maybe that's what you mean. It's no longer used for specific moments to increase the tension and to lock things in, but it's sort of the default. And that clashes with his aesthetic in a way, and the beauty of these imperfections.
Yeah, I mean, really, in terms of production, like if we're allowed to dream, let's say,
Yes.
right? Trevor Horn was really not as. Again, I love the album, but if we would have wanted something that is more timeless, like in the sense of that time, he would have had to work with people and accepted people who really have much less knowledge, much less technological knowledge than he had, because then you would have created a hybrid that could have been exciting and would have sounded warm even at that time. Like now, this is kind of like more cold sounding because the meeting of the minds was okay. Here's like music production as de and reconstruction, which Trevor did, and Mike's hand played music, where Amarok, like there's nothing on Amarok that's not in time.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like tight, very, very tight. So there was no reason really for Mike to get anybody to do it even tighter, which it isn't. Tubular Bells II isn't tighter than Amarok.
No.
But it's tighter it's more uptight, you could say.
It's more in the grid in a way.
It's in a grid, it's in a kind of grid, yes. And I don't know.
But
The funny thing is also that you would think, like, okay, maybe that production choice would only influence like parts of the album, but it's actually all the way through. which I still find interesting. So even though, like when you listen at these de-trevored versions, you see that that what sort of like happened to the pieces it happens all the way through the record. Yeah. And there are no moments, at least as far as I can tell, that have not been massaged.
I don't know if you have like concrete names. I made a list of people who could have produced it or might have produced it. Let's see what you think. But most of these actually were impossible for different reasons. So Michael Cretu, I actually put it out. I think he could have been an option, if the but he was on Virgin, so that was definitely not an option.
Yeah, for me that wouldn't work at all, because that would have kind of like already gone towards the Songs of Distant Earth and Voyager.
It would have been very different.
Yes, it is.
Then I have Frank Zappa. He was too ill at this point, so he couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Would have been, in terms of the orchestra, that would have been more in line with the orchestration, so probably that's not what he wanted. But then Simon Phillips, maybe with Tom Newman doing it, which would have been more.
I mean, yes. I mean, like for me, the obvious choice would have been to it be just a Mike Oldfield, Tom Newman project. Really,
and that's what it
was.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, then you have other names.
Anne Dudley and Jazz Coleman, who did the album, what's it called, Songs from the Forbidden City, which then Enigma sampled to great success. That would have been interesting. Anne Dudley, of course, classically trained. Jazz Coleman, completely unclassically trained. Or actually, he is classically trained, but he playing in Killing Joke. A completely wild character. That would have been interesting. And then finally, Brian Eno. I had Brian Eno there as well.
Yeah.
Because Brian Eno is someone who also has this, like, can rein in the technological approach, even though he is very technological.
You know, like one of my favorite Brian Eno records is from that time. It's Nerfnet.
Ah, yes, of course.
And that's an interesting idea, because it would have been electronic, let's say, or could have been electronic without and sounding organic at the same time.
Yeah,
that's true. Like, I'm thinking like more people like Michael Beinhorn, or like people who did Soundgarden at the.
I was thinking that direction, but
yeah, I'm just saying like this sort of like more extreme thought, like what would it have been if it was like at that time there was already a retro scene. So like Lenny Kravitz, for example. So making records that sound like they were from the 70s, but they were made in the early 90s or late 80s. So something like that could have been interesting. So where it's sort of like the soul vibe, let's say, some sort of like not the vibe, but the production of soul music or early 70s rock music, let's say, but updated to the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. And that kind of dirty guitar, that dirty kind of sound. I mean, I know that from a production standpoint, it's very difficult, like with that kind of production, very few instruments make a huge sound.
Yeah.
But with Mike's music, because you have many intricate elements, it doesn't work to make each sound dirtier, because then the overall thing gets too dirty, right? So that's also why we can think about these things, but I think that in Mike's particular case, the best, at least as far as I'm concerned, the best results would have been to give him full control and to have him work with the people that really understood him, which I guess would have been Tom Newman.
Actually, so the interview with Trevor was very, very cool. So I can recommend it just on the basis of, if you're interested.
And at some point we'll release it, right?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, the Mike Oldfield part is just very short, but there was one or two really interesting things. I don't know if I can quote it now, but the one thing he said was that there were so he was, again, as you often mentioned, he was super complimentary about him as a person, like Mike as a person. He said he was very, very nice. And one of the reasons I didn't write about Mike Oldfield in my book, this was when he just released his biography, was that there was nothing to report, but there was no drama. There was no big ego stuff going on. So that's why I didn't write about him. But sure, there were disagreements, but it's hard to argue with someone who writes the entire music, every single detail.
Yes.
Whereas Trevor would often be included in the writing process, writing, like adding to the lyrics and the music. And he wasn't, because Mike came up and he said he came up with new stuff every single day. And it was all good, it was all great. So there was always like an oversupply of great ideas.
Yeah.
And I think when I listen to the album, funnily enough, although I agree that there's Trevor, like the influence, the end result to a great degree, I don't really hear that much of his signature ideas that much.
I mean, of course not. How could you?
How could there be?
Yeah,
But I think,
yeah.
if I listen, like if you take Yes 90125,
Yeah.
like some of the arrangements are incredible. Like they're like magical. The vocal layering he does, and it's so experimental. That was a lot earlier. I think he wasn't able to do that here, and whatever, like for the good or the bad.
The funny thing is that Mike ended up working with Stephen Lipson on Men on the Rocks. Men on the Rocks is produced by the guy who was one of the big guys in Trevor's team in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of like these interconnections that are like over like a period of like 30 years that happened. I mean, I completely agree that, and that's why I'm still saying, okay, for a Mike Oldfield record, let him do it, you know. And at that time, he still had enough energy to do everything himself. Where later on, it was a big effort, you know. And I understand that because I feel the same about making music these days, you know, getting into, or in my 50s, you know.
Yeah.
And that's also like something that, you know, when people criticize musicians or albums or something, they don't understand that their life circumstance and their life energy and their creative energy may have already been mostly spent.
Absolutely.
Right? And I'm not talking about ideas, because you may still have ideas, but you can't really put them, you know, and that's why Mike is such an incredible example for all of us. Somebody who has managed to keep a very high level of output and creative output over such a long time, and it's really something extremely special. And so also that's why if there's anything like there that is not really super satisfactory, you know, like we can always forgive, you know. I really think, and yeah, I mean, like we haven't really talked about the music much yet.
Not yet, and there's still stuff I feel that's in my head, which
yeah, go for it.
Well, there's two things I wanted to share, which struck me when I listened to it again. Is so one is this thought: could he, instead of doing Tubular Bells II, could he have done Tubular Bells 2003 in 1992? I actually think Tubular Bells 2003, the first part, is amazing and incredible and sounds fantastic. And it sounds so uniquely of its own that I think it could have been Tubular Bells II.
You mean just a re-recording?
Yes, because I think 2003 is more than just a re-recording.
I mean, it is a re-recording.
It is a re-recording, but it's so it sounds to me, because he's not trying to go back to the original instruments. And the original production techniques at all. It's just it sounds it sounds digital and powerful, and with all of that, and it's so, to me it feels like almost like a different piece. So that I don't know if that could have worked as well.
No, I don't think so, because it literally is the definition of a re-recording. You know, it's the exact same piece re-recorded, and obviously that wouldn't have worked as a new product.
Okay, I'd say just
but I know what you mean, because to you it feels like it's a very different thing, and I agree. But I don't think it would have worked for a record company, because that it would. I mean, obviously, he could have released a re-recording, the 20th anniversary re-recording of Tubular Bells, but that's not something they could have sold like this.
Okay.
And also with the with the big event and the tour and everything, I think it was a good choice to make a new record. And as I said, like the sequel idea of this kind, where it's like a film, you take the same form, you take the same themes, that had been around in film, and like to do that with the music album, that was kind of a wacky idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it worked, like the success he had with it, it really worked. And, like I'm just going back looking at the cover here now. Also, you said you love the cover, right? And it's
front,
sort of, the
yeah.
front cover, but also, I think also
The back cover, yeah.
the back cover is interesting. It's sort of like, for the time, a very contemporary
Yeah.
look, and very contemporary technically also, made in a very contemporary way with early desktop publishing.
Yeah. I think to a degree, my disappointment in the album and in the beginning came from my wanting the album to sound more like the cover.
Yeah, I see. And that's also why when you're thinking about producers, you're thinking about electronic music producers, because it does really, in fact, look like an electronic music album. Yes, you're absolutely right.
And I don't think there's a credit for who did the cover. It just says it credits the photography again, like the bell. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's a credit for who did the design.
Yeah, I think it's Bill Smith, right? I would think it's Bill Smith who did this. Yeah, I mean it's interesting, like to see that how many typos are in this.
Yeah, I'm actually I had also made a mistake in my journalistic work just recently, and it all gets more relative. Like you can accept yourself more if you look at how some of these major productions, how many mistakes there are in there.
Yeah. And you see, like we haven't mentioned that a big chunk of this work was done in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Right, and Mike had even his studio shipped over.
Yeah.
As far as I know, and his equipment. I mean, not the studio. And so, like some of the players here, like for example, the drummer John Robinson, he's he's the drummer in LA. He is on thousands of records. He is like the Beat It drummer or whatever. He's on Michael Jackson records. He's really, and this is also funny. He's also the drummer on Man on the Rocks. So, like the LA connection, that was something there where maybe Mike kept some sort of contact, or at least he had like names to go back to. And all the other, like the people doing the programming and those are like the LA team that worked with Trevor at the time. And these people were involved with huge hits in the 80s, and early 90s.
Yeah.
So it really, in terms of like the team, it's really...
and the second engineer that is also brought in by Beitner, is that name, I think. Next to Tom Newman, there's also another engineer, and that's also from someone Trevor brought in, and who'd worked on
Tim Wheatner.
Yeah, so he'd also worked on lots of really successful productions.
Yeah, Steve McMillan. Yeah, yes. You see, and this is interesting now. I hadn't realized that, mixed by Steve McMillan and Mike Oldfield. So somebody else's name first.
Ah, okay.
Which makes sense.
I would have thought it was alphabetically. I don't know if it's...
I don't think so.
But probably not, no.
Yes. But you still had Richard Berry involved. Yeah.
So the other thing I thought about when I said about the higher level is, so Tubular Bells 3 we're going to get to when the Discord podcast reaches that point. But many people always thought Tubular Bells 3 is completely different, shouldn't have that name. But I think like the second side of Tubular Bells 2 is almost more in the vein of Tubular Bells 3. It's sort of, it anticipates that. Because the second side has more of a clear distinction between the tracks. especially towards the end where you have altered states. Tattoo.
Yeah.
And then altered states, and then Maya Gold. These are three sort of almost, and then of course the postlude or the yeah. And so it has more of this track-like character. The first side actually has more of the continuous flow feeling, and almost the second side almost, I don't know. For me, it anticipates this more insular arranging of ideas on Tubular Bells 3.
And that's interesting because that's also, if you think about it, on the original Tubular Bells, the first and second side are sort of the different pieces of music, drawing from different themes, with one exception, which is obviously the opening phrase, which sort of makes an appearance in side 2 as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's like two completely different pieces of music, and so the inspiration, like to take these themes and make variations for Tubular Bells II, is sort of like an obvious thing. So that's the first sequel. Now, like with the third sequel, like what do you do? Like how do you do that? And it just went further in every single way. Let's say where now we still have tracks with different names. The tracks are almost separate entities. They don't flow. They don't evolve. It's sort of like songs. Yeah. Right, and also, and this is interesting with Tubular Bells 3, where Tubular Bells 2 goes back to the themes of only Tubular Bells, but Tubular Bells 3 takes themes from everywhere, and samples from his back catalog, right? So, but we're going to get into that obviously when we talk about Tubular Bells 3. But in a way, Tubular Bells 2 is, how should I say, it's like an encapsulation of one mode of working that Mike was able to adopt. Right? Yep. So variation and recombination and also exploration. I mean, that's how I see it. Like that there's a big part of what he is or was in terms of music making was about experimentation. And I think in that regard, this album is really successful, artistically and also commercially, right? Like it really showed that, this sort of approach, at least at that time, was working.
So to me, I think why I think it's so great, and for me personally, is when you have something like Tubular Bells, which he actually says was important for like millions of people in their lives. They would play it at weddings, at funerals, during births. It was played. So when you come back to that, how can you reproduce that feeling, that huge, powerful effect of something in a new piece of music? And so you would say, one could argue it's impossible. Like if he had gone for the original approach of hewing closer to the first recording of the original Tubular Bells, as I'm going to call it, I don't think that would have been possible. But for me, what makes this great is that because he's playing with the ideas and varying them, putting them in new contexts, adding stuff here, taking something out there. Sort of when I listen to it, I have two layers going on in my mind. I have the original, which produced this profound impression on me, and I have the new stuff, which is also beautiful in its own right, and they're interacting, and it's almost like I'm experiencing the same thing again. Which is incredibly, like, it's almost impossible. How can you do that? And that's also, for example, the final. Someone wrote, well, the original had this huge build-up, and that's what made it great. But you already went through the original.
Yes.
So you can't go back to that. So that's why it takes a different approach. And that is the only way to go. Maybe not all of the choices are perfect, but there are choices which are somehow coherent in their entire thing, and it works for me on this level. It's experiencing something again, like it were new, as if it were new, which is almost impossible. Like people by remasters of remasters again and again. But this is actually a genuine attempt of going in a recording, doing something and allowing you to enter the same repertoires.
And I agree that a big part of like that we hardly ever mention is just the emotional impact that the music has on the listener. And so depending on which, like as a Mike Oldfield fan, which record have you heard first? So for me, it's impossible to imagine what is it like to become a fan listening to Tubular Bells II.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, in a way I can imagine, because it may have had the same effect to somebody, or same or similar effect to somebody that, like, say, Tubular Bells or Hurgust Ridge had to me, or Incantations, right? So the same emotional, like the goosebumps, just, you know. So if you haven't heard the original Tubular Bells, you still get goosebumps when the bell comes in here, and you know that's your experience of that ties you and that impresses you, right? And so we always need to think about it this way, and I think we both know for a fact that there's a whole new and many new generations, several generations of listeners who love Mike Oldfield's music, and they all started in a different place, right? And this is really important also, like as like meta commentary to what we're doing here, right? Obviously, like you as a listener may have a completely different, because you started in a different place. But what is important about this is that this music is extremely powerful, and it draws you in, and it may give you, no matter if it's experienced as part of a chronological thing, which what we're doing here with this series, right, going chronologically. But like it's not like that in the wild. Right? In the wild, you would have like a journey of discovery that is very unlike anybody else's, right? And I think in that regard, Tubular Bells II is also an extremely powerful record to draw people in. It is, especially if you don't have the context.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially, and you know, there's the before I forget to mention that there's the Clear Light track, which is the track that in the original Tubular Bells starts with the basses, with that basses solo, with the string bass also, right? It's that theme, and I have to say that Clear Light, the second half of it, is maybe the most intricate and most complex layered composition Mike's ever done. Like I haven't counted them, like 8, 9, 10 different melodies interlocking and it's mixed beautifully as well. Like again, like here, like if I use the word cold before, it doesn't apply generally, you know, like, but it's just some amazing achievement, you know, with this record.
Clear Light, actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not that well versed with the track title and music, but I think Clear Light starts off with a variation of the sequence, which is actually also really incredible and could have been the main sequence.
Yes.
So the dark synthesizer underpinning, like a deep bass pattern, and then there you have the sequence, and that is a great variation of the sequence.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. And also like something like the Maya Gold track, where you would think like how do you redo that guitar solo, let's say, or that, you know, like 18-year-old or 19-year-old playing his heart out on an old Telecaster guitar. How do you do that? And he managed to transpose it into a different world, and it works, and it's beautiful, it's incredible. And it's playing Strat, you know, it's like with a very, very, very distinctly different sound, but still evoking the form, you know, and the function, both form and function of the original, but in a completely new way.
So we're talking about the music now?
Yes, I think we're talking about the music, because there's some things that I really need to say.
Yes, I wanted to just say that one thing we haven't even talked about is the fact that the album I mean, Tubular Bells for many people is just a sequence, but this one has two themes, right? So before we get to the sequence, it actually starts with another theme. So it has two.
Just like the original. It
Which is-
also has those two.
And but I think it's really pronounced here. Is I think to me almost because it's so maybe also the production and it's on piano, but they're related, and I think that's just
I mean, we talked about this before, that like the really special thing about Tubular Bells II is it doesn't start with what you call the sequence, right? It starts with the second theme, which is in the original, it's what Mike called the beautiful tune or the A minor tune, right? It's A minor tune later. It's the minor variation of what opens this.
Yeah.
And the funny thing, this is reminiscent of, and I said it when we were talking about these albums, it's the Wind Chimes and even Crisis, where there is an opening before we get the sequence part, right? Before we get the finale part. And that is really cool that he does that here, that it opens with those piano notes.
That's also for me part of this feeling of recreating something and giving you the same feeling by not giving you everything the original had, because it creates the anticipation. So is this Tubular Bells? How can this be Tubular Bells if the sequence doesn't open it?
Yes.
And that gives when it does come in such a super
Powerful. Yeah. And actually right now it gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, think about it sometimes.
Yeah,
Right?
because it's really I don't want to use the word clever. It's emotionally clever.
Yeah.
To do that, like and just kind of like thinking about like how do you, if you are in the mode of recreating this and you have mapped it out, and then to decide to put something in front is really great. I mean, again, that shows me again like, okay, there is like a really great musical mind here to understand that if you frame this.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a 30-second intro.
There's a story where he tells that he had just bought a synthesizer, Mike, and he used the first preset, which was on.
Yeah, is it the M1, Korg M1 maybe?
Yeah,
I don't know.
And he said, so the preset was three instruments playing at the same time.
Yeah.
It was a piano, an organ, and a Glockenspiel.
Yeah.
So when he started playing this, and it was the sequence. So,
Yeah.
it was pre-programmed, the Tubular Bells sequence pre-programmed into one of the big synthesizers of the time.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of gave him the idea of doing it again, because it had become it had become a product in a way, and almost like a cliche.
Mm-hmm.
Just by being so omnipresent and being used so often.
I mean, even like this is funny, but even when the DX7 came out in the mid '80s, and there was a preset on it called Tubular Bells because it was like the sound of tubular bells. Like everybody was thinking about the record, not about the instrument, right? Yeah. It was really funny.
That's true. Yeah.
Sorry, that was just
but tell me some about things of the music you want, because that's really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. I mean. So like the clear light thing, I wanted to mention that it's like a fugue of the themes, and beautiful, and it transposes, like in a way that things that he'd done with incantations or on QE2, like where like the same themes just simply are moved or transposed in parallel, which is kind of like a no-go, but he makes it work in a beautiful way. Right, and that's also something that like electronic music of the '70s was doing, and that's why I also think some people mistake this music for electronic music. Sentinel is the first track, is a completely new piece. It's not what the early stages was about. It's completely rewritten. It's a new song, and I would actually call it song because it is designed more like a pop song.
It was written for a single release.
Yes, that's what it sounds like. And so we really have lost the original idea for Tubular Bells II here, completely. And then and as you said, like this has basically two sections, right? Where the first section is what became the single. Oh, there was an edit that shortened the second half a little bit and then brought back the beginning, or if I can remember correctly. There are some incredible solo guitar versions that Mike played on the TV at that time, because he was on a promo tour for that. And I remember there's like an Australian show he was on where he's playing, where he's showing, okay, this is the original Tubular Bells, and then on the new record it's like this, and it's great because he goes from just playing that theme to like a really funky acoustic guitar. I don't know if you ever heard that acoustic guitar version of Sentinel, right? Really funky, very, very cool. And you could also see that at the time as a guitarist, he was really on top of it. Very, very great player at the time.
It's actually also in the footage from the early sessions. You see him playing the bass, which is the way he's playing.
Exactly,
the
it's
riff.
beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? Yeah, it's such a powerful player, incredible. And you know, like on the acoustic, like he's like kind of slapping on the acoustic and really getting like these very, very strong sounds out of it. Yeah, so I recommend like to find that on YouTube. There, you know. And so anyway, like Sentinel, like with the exception of the voices, which I still don't like much because they don't gel well. I think it would have been possible to have voices and have them more integrated. But anyway,
I think it's sort of almost a statement of intent. You know, you're getting into it, and when the bass comes in, and then you have the guitar. That's a dub. It's a dub. It's almost like dub.
Yeah,
and I think it makes clear that it's something different, and to the listener, it's signaling.
Yeah. And then like, the Dark Star track, which has that. I don't know how to call it. That guitar, that fast guitar part, which here, and again, I like that. He's gone in super fast.
Is that actually played, do you think, or is it played slow and then sped up?
No, it is played.
That's really.
I mean, and on you can say live he's playing it too. Or actually, it's two guitars sharing that part, like one playing 4 bars at a time or something. But anyway, it is played, and it's great. Like to really, and this it kind of fits in what I said about the acoustic guitar performance of Sentinel. He was really, really good at the time. Really fast, very well trained, and this sort of slightly, he kept some of a lot of the futuristic sounds, like I said, that he had developed on Earth Moving and Amarok. Like these sounds, you can still find them here, the guitar sounds, and including this highly distorted, almost synth-like lead sound, which is incredible, and that Clear Light, as I said, has this very intricate and beautiful, extremely beautiful, extremely intricate.
That's your standout track.
Yes. Blue Saloon, like the bluesy guitar thing, a little bit more clinical sounding than I would have liked, let's say, for this part, but still beautiful melody, a little more generic, again, harmonically, simpler than in the original.
I like that in the concert version from Edinburgh.
Yes.
That is really amazing.
Yes, exactly. It comes alive when it's played live, right? Yeah. And then the Sunjammer thing, which I read, I think one of the reviews says that it reminds the reviewer of like the Who's Tommy or something, which I didn't mean like it's just like these strummed chords, and it's also like harmonically not as daring as the original, and it's more like how to say it? Like,
pop rock.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, has never been a favorite of
He keeps coming back to it. I mean, that's one of the things he took for Tubular Bells 3. That's
actually Outcast, on Tubular Bells, exactly. And then Red Dawn. So like when it gets into the finale, is very interesting. Like again, like how you've written like some of the greatest guitar intros to anything, like which is like the beginning of the finale, and like how do you do that? And he manages to. It's sort of like more of a. I don't know how to say it, but the compositionally it's again there's more clarity for what it is, right? So less ambiguous in its writing, but it works just as beautifully. And you can, and this is something that I found interesting. You could use the original Tubular Bells Red Dawn part to go into the bell,
Yeah.
or you could do it the other way around. You could take the Red Dawn and go into the original bass part, let's say, of the finale, and it works. It's kind of like you could even build a hybrid of these records.
That's you should mention maybe this, because you told me about this recording. I didn't really take to it. Not the best of Tubular Bells.
Yes.
Which is a CD which you can really buy really cheaply now, like as used CD, and it makes use of different recordings and then edits them together. So it uses the orchestral Tubular Bells and the original Tubular Bells II. And it's an attempt at that.
And the live version.
And live versions,
Both
yes, that's which is really funny.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting...
Does it have Millennium Bell on it too?
Yes, it has the Millennium Bell, off the Millennium Bell.
Yeah, okay.
I wish they had done more of what you just said. I think, and it's very heavy on the first one, and very light on Tubular Bells II, which is a shame. But it's still an interesting experiment, an idea.
Yes.
Of course.
Maybe something we could do at some point.
Maybe we should do it. But Virgin did this, so they must have probably struggled to get the rights for the second one, and that's why.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but interesting, right? And then so the bell, which I think is genius, right? To really write something that is, I mean, it's so iconic, that section, right? And to write something that does the same but doesn't, it is incredible. And like the original has a 10-bar loop, right? And the bell has a 9-bar loop, 9 bars. Incredible. Like, so it's like you say, it's more complex there. And yes, the funny thing is that, and when I said like that this answers some of my questions, in the first, on the original Tubular Bells, he has, it's sort of in an ambiguous key. Like you don't really know, and he uses both the B natural minor and the B natural major chords. In a really beautiful way, by also introducing these voices at the end of the finale section, and then you actually understand. Oh, this section now is major, and then like a bar later it's in minor, and it's really interesting. And I was always wondering, like, has he done this? Was that a conscious thing, conscious choice to write like that, or? And then to realize that in the bell he does exactly the same thing, but he makes it clearer.
Yeah, he harmonizes it.
Yeah, he puts the major and the minor chord in there very, 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 very clearly.
Yeah.
There's no ambiguity anymore, but it also shows me as a composer that he knows exactly what he did, and he's doing it again here to actually show us that he knows. That's sort of like the impression that I'm getting, and also and like, I mean, like a 10-bar phrase is already something that usually, and it's blues, right? Originally, like the blues, but it's a 10-bar blues, right? And now it gives us a 9-bar version of it. I think it's just so cool. You know?
I like this one as well. And it works. That one too works better, I think, in the live setting. But I've always wondered a bit about the choices. I think
choices of instruments.
Yeah, I think the humor got a bit too much of him here. I think, I don't know, the Venetian effect and the two sample guitars I can actually go with, even though I find it absolutely dissatisfying that in the live version he's actually having guitarists play it. I mean, if you're going to have two sample guitars, it has to be two sample guitars. But the Venetian effect, when there's digital sound processing, they actually removed those for the single version.
And the vocal chords.
But the vocal chords are actually nice, especially on the vinyl. But yeah, I don't know. I think this effort, this attempt to modernize it is a good idea, but the execution, I'm not so
I don't know. It's a little bit about what we said about the original or the demo version of Omadon. Remember?
Yeah.
Where he does the talking, the
Yes.
funny talking over the end section, and it's a little bit like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think just making fun of things has always been in Mike's music. Again, like it or not, but yeah, I mean, to me, it was also too goofy, at the time. But now I can appreciate it in the context of his wackiness.
Yeah.
And
it sets it off by going for Shakespearean presentations.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that having Alan Rickman's voice saying that is really, really ridiculous.
Yeah, that's. I think you have to see it through that lens.
Yeah.
I just wish they had used the single mix because it's so more. It really builds up to the big Tubular Bells finale.
Mm-hmm.
So the original Tubular Bells were broken, so they actually used the toy Tubular Bells for this one, and then it was really manipulated processed in the computer.
Yeah. Many layers of sounds and sine
does sound
waves.
very good.
Yeah. But like I said, it's a design product, right? And like everything. And in a way, I really feel for Mike as like what I call the sellout. It's really not that. It's more of a focus. Getting like more focus and doing something that may work for people, rather than just expressing yourself. It's doing something that may actually work for people, that people may like, that more people may like. Why not? It's a change of mind and heart set.
Yeah.
Right. I find.
Yeah. And the double finale, I also like that a lot. That we actually get the first.
We get that, yes.
That is also. I mean, he's like that's.
And that's something that I mean, I personally don't like it that much. I have to say, like musically, but this obviously is inspired by the way that he played Tubular Bells live, because especially on the first tour he did in '79, where the band kicked in at the end playing the theme. And in a way, it's sort of a version of that. And basically, also on Tubular Bells 2003, he does the same, if you remember.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
And I also like this, like it brings the whole thing completely full circle.
Yes.
Because it starts off with that and it ends with that. And to me, it emphasizes the fact that we really have two different sides here. Whereas it closes the whole thing, rather than on the 1973 one where you have it sort of flows more into the second side, which is a different piece, but it sort of continues there. Whereas this one, I think it has two distinct sides.
And where at the very end of the bell, which is just the acoustic guitar, just like on the original, actually that reprise of the variation of the sequence, right, is actually kind of more beautiful than the original. I find it's the recording is not that great, recording quality, but and when I say that, I don't mean that it doesn't work well. I think it works really well the way it's recorded, but it's very emotional. It's even potentially more emotional than the original ending.
Who knows whether that was something they took like literally from
an older.
It's
possible. It is possible. And yeah, I mean, having said all this, like we haven't really talked about the way he makes these variations here and how they work.
Do you know?
And like, because here it is still that he's using odd time signatures for it, right? Like even though it's in Sentinel, it's in the 8/8, 4/4. But it's not exclusively that, and so he's still using the odd time signatures here, and he's made it even more melodic. There's more to it. I played like when I played this record to my daughter, she's 5, and she kind of like picks them up, the melodies up immediately, and kind of hums along, and even with these more complex things. But you can see that they have some sort of universally human thing about them, so that they can get picked up
True, my daughter actually had the
without
same thing.
intellect.
She
you know?
actually also, what you played this a few days ago already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just something that is still very, very emotional, and still very, very much Mike Oldfield because of that. You know.
Do you think, let's take the main sequence or the
Yeah.
variation. Do you have an idea, the inkling why? Because I'm pretty sure I actually read an interview somewhere, which I've never been able to find, that he went through many, many iterations of the sequence to find the one he liked. Why he went for this one? Do you think there's a particular quality in the Tubular Bells II sequence? I mean, we now have lots of.
I think yes. I think what I mean, it's funny that I even have an answer to that, to be honest. But I think this one is like harmonized with 4 chords, and I think that's what makes this one. So changed, changed,
Yeah.
So it has 4 chords, and that's really what it is. It's sort of it's not that sequence anymore.
Yeah.
It's a melody that spans 4 chords that can be harmonized, reharmonized, etc. And that's what makes this one so interesting. But however, if you wanna really go, and maybe you know this, there's this short interview on the Knapworth video where Mike is demonstrating, just improvising variations of the Tubular Bells theme on his guitar.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic to see. But because, and that's something where, remember when I was pointing out that the Taurus theme is actually a variation of the Tubular Bells theme. You can hear it there. He's playing it there, and you realize that he must have just, you know, that what she calls just the hammering between like one note and other notes, and he demonstrates that and comes up with endless variations of that. And yeah, I think when he was working on Music of the Spheres, or you know, that was the time when he was again like talking about like going through all of these variations of it to find like a new, inspiring, melodic, I guess, variation of that sequence.
I always thought the Tubular Bells 4, which was never finished, that was also a great variation of the sequence, which has a sort of a loop, hypnotic.
Yeah. I mean, like that's I think if it had been realized, it could have been really great.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm not really. I don't agree with the fact that they released that demo.
No, me neither. It's definitely not finished.
Yeah. I mean, I think they shouldn't have done that, but they needed something for the 50th anniversary. Yeah. But anyway, I remember when he was talking about that online, about the Tubular Bells 4 thing, where he said that he'd finally found a version that satisfied him, that he was excited about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's true what you mentioned about the chords underneath, because when the early stages recording progresses a bit more, you actually get that. It cycles through all these the chords, which is really interesting.
And it goes, and that's very funny, it goes to those diminished chords, which is something that he rarely uses, but he only uses them in Tubular Bells, actually. It's the end of what's called the jazz section. It's the one before the Red Dawn. So here would be the end of Sunjammer.
Yeah.
Right? It's a particular kind of dissonant chord, really, that was really, really out of line with doing a mainstream or record that could make, you know, could be a #1 record. So they dropped that. So I understand, you know, I get it. But that's the early stages version is really more going places, let's say. Yeah, totally. Okay, so side 1, like that's that, you know, and then side 2, again, like starts with what's called Weightless here, which starts with the harmonics, just like side 2 of the original, and then moves through these, you know, like Weightless has the drum loops and has the voices, and so it's very, very much like the the new age thing,
Yeah.
which we didn't have that much on side one, a little bit. So it has that new age thing, and then the Great Plain, kind of surprising, where he goes into sort of a more Americanized,
Yeah.
with more resonator guitar sounds, I guess,
Yeah.
and also banjo and
Yeah. He trades in a bit of this English pastoral trance for the American New
Yes.
Age or
Americana sounds.
Americana sound.
Yes, which is kind of cool. It's funny, and I mean you could think of it as a joke again, like a little bit. And at the time, it felt to me like to be too much of a novelty kind of thing. But now listening to it now, it has a certain charm to it. And again, especially if you don't know the original,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, Sunset Door. Here, like with the Great Plain and Sunset Door, I'm actually not even sure where the seam is, like where the.
The first three seek really.
Yeah, it's almost like it's really nicely like.
And then there's a transition.
Yeah, and now Tattoo. There's something I have to say about that.
Yeah, well, I just wanted, you can
Yeah.
do this on your own, but I just wanted to say, I think Tattoo is really like in terms of the variation and the idea of transformation, that is the gene. For me, that's the idea alone of doing this. Whether or not you think it's in taste, in good taste or not, is one thing. I think it's amazing, but I actually had to go back initially to find out what that referred to. When you know it, it's plain and obvious, but I think just what a great idea.
It's the theme of Tubular Bells. I mean, it's what Mike Oldfield single it was called, right? Back then, right? And it's a variation of that. Yeah, what I is notable about this is, and again, it's one thing that has been like for a while the question, like, does he know what he's doing? He knows, because here he's combining two subdivisions, rhythmic subdivisions. So eighth notes and triplets exist at the same time. And this very thing he did on Heaven's Open already. So just a few months earlier, he worked on a part that's very similar, where you have the shuffle and the straight combined, and it creates that tension at the beginning of the intro of the two, let's say, before the big melody and the bagpipes come in. The singer, the pipers come in, and it's originally, this idea is from Tubular Bells. It's like the intro to what is here called Dark Star, which also has that, and then here it is really like that slow 2 against or 3 against 4 rhythm, and then it leads into the Tattoo and the melody. It's kind of like, I would say it's a little bit cheesy, a little bit simplistic, but powerful in an Oldfield way. For me, it was always overpowered by its cheesiness, unfortunately. So I wasn't really emotionally moved by that part yet. Okay, I have to always say yet, because it may still happen. What is fascinating about this is that all the live versions, they're transposed to a different key. There's a change to a different key. If you listen closely, you'll hear that they modulate to a different key in order to have the live pipers play to it. So that means that for this recording, the instruments were tuned differently.
That's interesting. I didn't.
Yes. So that's really for anybody interested in it. You have, like it modulates to a different key in order for the live pipers to be able to play.
So that means it. Okay. And for when you saw him live, does that mean he took pipers on tour? They were part of the ensemble?
I think so.
Wow. I thought it was just for the Edinburgh performance.
You know what? I can't swear, but I think, yeah. Because like, why would you transpose it otherwise?
And ultimately, I mean, it was a big cast anyway. It was a really big ensemble.
Yeah. And then, like, okay, Altered State being ridiculous, kind of like I don't really like it at all.
Okay,
right?
then we're in.
But then calling it Altered State makes it very interesting. Like, I've never thought about it. Like, why does he do that? I think there's a car alarm outside. Like, we'll see if we can get rid of that in post-production. Anyway, so altered state. Why is it called altered state? Why, do you have any idea what the lyrics mean? Is there anything that you can tell us about it? That
Well, I mean, the original was done in an altered state. It was inebriation. So the original.
yeah, but this one is even like this one is really drunk, where the original is kind of a rock song with some growling on it. But this is really like really crazy.
I have no insights to offer, unfortunately.
What does Kikese mean?
Oh, that. Oh no, but that. Yeah, those are actually great. I mean, to say I don't like the part, I really just don't like the that particular growling and where's my mommy say? Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
mommy section.
Yeah.
The other parts are fantastic, and actually, said that's from a birthing song. I think he said it. It's an Indian
Oh, okay. I
Native
didn't know.
American thing. I have to look it up.
Yeah, where's your mommy? Where's she's gone? Right.
Yeah, and
I mean, in a way, I mean, like again, like I'm saying ridiculous, but if I say these words, you know, with his mommy, you know, like if he's referencing his mommy and his life,
oh yes,
and like it again gives me goosebumps.
that's
you know?
actually no. He
Yeah.
actually explicitly says that in the interview I mentioned before with his maybe the writing partner. He singles out this in the book, maybe in Changeling. He broke up his long and important relationship, and he was going back in time and thinking about his mother. He actually says that. Never thought about it, but that's
Yeah.
seems very plausible.
Yes. Yes. And so being ridiculous, being a little bit
The
funny,
jester.
thing, like the jester kind of thing, exactly. And that's what this part stands for. And he's gone like overboard with that here,
Yeah.
I think. And I understand like that people feel repelled by it. And you know, I am somewhat, you know. Also like the way that he has restructured the original musical ideas for this is sort of is crazy, you know. But again, it has JR on drums, so it's really groovy.
Yep.
Great playing by Mike, like amazing guitar
Just the
parts.
piano, actually. The piano's also very nice.
Yes, and then he has like this funny brass band kind of sound on it, and with a tuba. I don't know. It must be samples, but like with the tuba bass on it and stuff like that. It's totally ridiculous.
That could be a callback to the Charleston, you know, from Platinum in a way. I don't know, but
Yeah, those sounds maybe a little bit, but no, I don't think it's really just more that Americanization. In a way, maybe even like a meta commentary to the record itself within the record, you know. Yeah, I was thinking the same about the Great Plains song, right? Where the Americana sounds and somehow, and especially like the Moonshine, the banjo tune at the end rather than the mandolin, right? And all of this kind of like bringing these American cultures,
Yep.
Maya Gold, right?
yeah, South America. Exactly.
Yeah, so it has like a North American, you know, reference North America
Yeah.
and those cultures. And because he was there, so maybe it's something that he just decided at that point. I have acquired all the old instruments, but no, let's use resonator guitar and a dobro and a banjo and blah blah blah. And it's kind of funny, and in a way, it really points to this thing that we've said, that maybe even though it happened in a relatively short time, maybe conceptually things were in flux all the time,
I think so.
and bringing in all the American people to work with him on it, where Trevor obviously is not, but the LA team,
Yeah.
right?
He isn't, but he actually lived in the States at that time, the way I understand it. So, yeah, very likely.
Also, like I think I'm not sure now, but on the at the live concert, the Moonshine song, the last song, the last piece, was also played with a fiddle. There was like a guy who was in the crew, I think, who played fiddle, who played the. So really taking it totally out of character, let's say, And I think it's cool just for that, you know. Yeah, I don't listen to it much these days anymore. This record, you know. But obviously I've listened to it for our conversation.
Yeah.
And I've actually downloaded it also to my phone so I could listen on the go.
Maybe I think for me it's also because it happened in a period where I was really hungry, just from and
Yeah,
just,
and you're younger than me, so
yeah, and that was really these were important years. Lots of my favorite albums I discovered in that time period. And,
you know, you also need to know this was the time that I started that I was actually that very year when he was working on this. I was studying with Robert Fripp. That was my first year with Robert Fripp. Right, so I was going into a completely like more serious prog kind of and a direction. So I was sort of not plugged into Mike's emotional world so much anymore at that time.
yeah, that came a bit more later in the 90s for me. And
Yeah, it makes sense because like we're 5 years or like 6-7 years apart, right?
yeah,
And it makes sense that that I didn't really get into it that strongly at that time because I was, you know, like getting into King Crimson and also like even like I didn't know much about Yes or bands of that kind at the time and got into that old Yes stuff at the time.
I will say to the credit of the weirdness of Tweeters that the weirdness to me prevents it from being dated. I think if you listen to a lot of the electronic music stuff from the 90s, I mean, lots of it sounds great, mainly because it's sampled and the samples are great and have the great recordings baked into them. And this one it's actually, it's his own samples. So so it doesn't have, it doesn't share these cliched references, which a lot of these other ones have.
Yeah.
But the weirdness, for me, compensates for what could be something which is really of its time. And I think when I listen to it today, I'm not hearing something from the early 90s so much. It doesn't go overboard with the ethnic samples. It doesn't go overboard with the electronic instruments. There's actually very subtle electronic layering throughout. And if you listen on headphones, you hear that, and it's really worth exploring. It's really its own thing.
It's, you know, it's interesting that you say that because now I'm thinking about like if we look at the 2003 version, which is a re-recording, you know, of the 73 version or of the 73 album, and if Mike would still be making music, an interesting, or would still be working in the studio, an interesting project would be to make an all acoustic version of Tubular Bells II.
Yes.
To record it only as he originally set out with the original instruments.
Totally.
And hand played, completely hand played. That would be something that would be great.
Yes.
I really think so.
Although it would have to be rearranged, I'm pretty sure, some sections.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that would be
Or
cool.
changed. Like that's what I'm saying. Like I don't think of it as a like re-recording in the one-to-one sense, but you know.
It's a project for you, maybe.
Yeah. But I think Music of the Spheres would be one that would be fantastic to be played with acoustic guitars rather than the orchestra.
Yeah.
So there are some parts of the Tubular Bells canon, like or some albums in the Tubular Bells canon that would really benefit from being, or could be very interesting, let's say, being recorded in an all acoustic guitar, keyboards kind of format.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, the titles have the Clark references, and then not Music of the Spheres, actually, Songs of Distant Earth.
Yeah.
It's the science fiction, but it's a really interesting idea of science fiction that he has, which is almost a yearning for, I don't know, it's not a yearning for something foreign, it's maybe something familiar. Different but familiar.
Yeah.
And I think, like,
And a bit like the science fiction of the 80s was.
yeah,
Right.
naive.
Yeah, like kind of naive, yeah. but cool because it's just sort of like yeah, it has a certain hopefulness about it, let's say.
Yeah.
Which after the the 80s, after the Cold War, finally settled, like let's say at that point, when this album came out. It's interesting. Like and I mean also historically, it sort of makes sense that this record happened at that time.
I think that it's no coincidence that 1991, 1992 were important for me because it was a particular moment, and I can't explain why it happened, but it wasn't just Mike who was successful. It sold 4 million copies, which is insane to think about. But there was also Vangelis, who had also signed to Warner, and who had just released, or was it I don't know, it could be later actually, I'm not quite sure. Almost the same time, Conquest of Paradise, which was a huge hit in Europe, and sold probably, the soundtrack sold probably the same, shifted the same amount of copies. And Enigma, which the first album is almost entirely instrumental with very little vocal samples. Actually, if you listen to it, it's really a lot of instrumental stuff. And so they have a short period of maybe 3 years, but there was an audience again, like there was in the 70s, like a short window in time where this happened, and then it changes, and we're back sort of to more regular procedures. Really,
it's interesting that that's also the time when grunge kind of like started happening, and then became popular, and in a way posed a total. It's in a way the second time it happened to Mike.
Yeah,
like in the late 70s with punk, or mid and late 70s with punk, and then here where the grunge movement happened, and Mike never really went anywhere in that direction. And I mean, like, we're going to talk about it when we get to Tubular Bells III, but it's striking, like when the Outcast tracks said, out demon out. I find that still also like a potential. Also a commentary also on his past, like not on his demons and it's like Tubular Bells 2 for me, like I said before, is, and I wonder what Mike would really say about it. Like it's just so sad that we can't talk to him, but it really is the turning point. I remember that you were talking about this, like even like in the early 80s, or like we were like that there were like these turning points. But I think this is just like really something completely different. Remember that in the tour program I got back then, he was promoting, or he had started, I don't know what you call that, a foundation or something. It was called Tonic.
Yep.
So to help people get psychotherapy. Right, very interesting. So he was an activist in that regard.
And it's telling that in the book, there's both, like the section about Tonic isn't super long, but he talks about it in somewhat in depth, and it's longer than the section dedicated to Tubular Bells II.
Yeah,
I think that says a lot.
Yes,
I think it is a turning point, but maybe also because Warner really suffered from this Prince thing where he accused the company of limiting his creative freedom. Whereas Warner was actually known as a company which was super artist friendly. And in a way, I had to think of this when I listened, when I was just had the best offer on, and it came to Be Free.
Yeah.
Which is also one of the things he wrote during the Warner years. I think maybe there was a bit too much freedom. I think this one, Tubular Bells II, was written almost as if he were thinking of Richard Branson, but not writing for Virgin anymore.
Yeah.
And after that, he realized, oh no, Warner is actually different. They're really different. And there was also like a familiar involvement of Clive Banks. Clive Banks was his manager.
Yes.
His wife.
That is the first time he had like a designated manager, right?
And the wife of Clive Banks was a part of the we're big in Warner. So there was a connection. And I think they were really treating him like family. And then I think to a degree there was so much freedom that it was maybe getting hard to focus. I don't know. I think in that sense, the turning point may have been also the environment in which now his music is being released into.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and obviously like the strong ties to the USA with this,
Yes.
which
But there was no US tour, I believe, right?
yeah, there was.
There was?
Yeah. Yeah, he played Carnegie Hall, and I don't know how many shows in the US, maybe 4, 5, 6, something like that. Yeah.
The whole thing was pretty concentrated. As I told you many times before, my biggest, let's say, regret is I didn't go see him on this tour. Where I could have. He actually played in The Hague, which is like really weird for him to even play there rather than the bigger Dutch stages. But he played in the Congresgebouw in The Hague, and I didn't go and see it. Even though that album was all I listened to at the time. But I thought he's just going to play it the same way. I'm not going to go. Next tour. A friend of mine went and he said he was a bit disappointed, but he was impressed and disappointed because it was,
it was rather short.
Yeah, it was rather short.
Yeah. It was just Tubular Bells II and an excerpt of Ora Bidou, I think, funnily enough. Yeah. And then they played another excerpt of Tubular Bells II again. So it was really like only can't remember now, 80-minute concert or something like that.
Well, I for one would, like, to me, the holy grail would be the deluxe box set, which brings, like, unearths the archival stuff that's undeniably or certainly out there.
Yeah. I mean, like, for those interested, you can find the untrappered mixes somewhere online. You can find what you call the documentary, like Mike recording them. I think it's making of Tubular Bells II or something.
Yeah.
And then there is footage of the rehearsals of the band for Tubular Bells II.
Yeah.
And it's all very, very interesting. And you mentioned I think the Anne Nightingale interview,
Oh, yes,
right?
Yeah.
Because at that time, I think Annie was maybe writing but that was never realized, that book, as far as I understand.
I thought it would have been like early stages of Changeling.
Yeah, probably parts of, but I know that never went anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, are we done? I mean, like, I'm pretty sure that I have not looked, but this must be the longest we've ever talked about.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Well, we're over 2 hours.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we apologize. And so let us know what you think. Please leave us comments. We have been getting more and more comments on the videos.
Yes, and many thanks. Actually, there were some really, really helpful ones.
Yes, and some that brought light to long asked questions.
Music from the balcony.
Yes.
Balconies.
Yes.
That was really...
yeah, incredible. Yeah, thank you very much. And let's interact more about this. I think there are more things we can unearth and we can understand.
We should also maybe do this in the text underneath the video. But one thing we've been thinking about is how to better stay in touch with everyone who is interested in these topics.
Yeah.
And one idea was maybe to set up a Substack newsletter where we could also post additional bonus content.
Yes.
Because it seems like YouTube is no longer properly sending out alerts for the new videos anymore. There seems to be an issue, and maybe Substack is an option to go.
Yeah. We'll keep you updated on what we come up with. And this is an ongoing project which we're not intending to stop anytime soon. Yeah. We'll go through all the albums, and then there will be lots of other episodes about other details and people involved. And anyway, thank you so much. This was the Mike Oldfield Discography podcast and Tubular Bells II, and thank you so much.